Hello everyone. Today I want to discuss a little bit about a debate that I just heard, and it has to do with what is marriage. And the two people debating, one is someone that is a well-known debater, Dr. James White. He's a Reformed Christian, so he holds a very traditional view of what marriage is. And the other person on the debate is a progressive Christian, and I'm not familiar with him, so I don't recall his name. But I'll leave the debate in the description below if you want to hear it and check it out. The thing that kept coming onto my mind about the progressive Christian that was speaking and making his arguments, which I personally feel he had very little support, if any support at all. I just kept thinking he's misinterpreting. He's taking one Bible verse and applying it to like our worldview, but and doing that throughout the Bible. But not taking like the whole Bible as a whole and what the whole Bible teaches about something. And it's really a very interesting topic. I have read a book about progressive Christians before by Elisa Shielders, and she shares in that book her experience coming into, learning about progressive Christianity as well. And so I know there's a lot more that I would have to learn about that. I'm not a progressive Christian, so but that's not my purpose in this video. My purpose here is just to share with you a thought I had about just how overall in the progressive Christians' arguments in this debate, I noticed how there was a very great lack of belief in what the Bible teaches as being authoritative. The man kept saying things like, we have to ask the question, what is Christ, Christ-centered or something like that? What does Christ teach us? What did he say? What did he do? But it was, at the same time, this man held a rejection for the belief that God actually inspired in a not flawed manner the rest of scripture. So and I want to be careful with how I say this, because I want to be sensitive to Christians who are new in their faith and that haven't gone into Christian apologetics, and you do wrestle with doubts, and I know I want to be a burden to you if that's something you're struggling with. I want to encourage you to, take those things to God and ask Him to teach you more about Him. Maybe join a Christian apologetics book club. Go to your pastors for help. Read books that will answer your questions from a Christian perspective. Don't feel overwhelmed. You don't have to have all the answers to all of your questions right now. You can just start with one at a time, and God will lead you through that. But I do want to be careful with how I talk about these things. I have heard non-Christians, people that do not label themselves as progressive Christians, who I think resembles this person. And obviously I'm not trying to misrepresent him, but I did get the impression that he and non-Christians would share a lot of disbelief about the Old Testament, and that the authority of the scriptures of the Old Testament, about the New Testament apostles, what they wrote. And so I just thought, okay, if you have so little weight in your view about what God teaches in Genesis about marriage being between a man and a woman, And if you listen to the debate, he goes deeper into that. So I'm not trying to say that this was the only thing he said. But if your views are that a lot of what was written was just their perspective, and that Jesus was coming and like in a sense he was undoing all of the errors in their perspectives, which is a contrary view to what Christianity actually teaches, that God inspired the authors, and in a manner that although we can um, hear and see the things, how they're different, right, the different authors and things like that, um, ultimately, despite all of those differences, God was able to perfectly communicate through these imperfect people what he wanted us to know. He gave us what was enough for us to, to land where he wants us to land, um, with our understanding of scripture and how to properly apply it to our lives today. So I just kept thinking, how does that man, progressive Christian man, think that what he has in the Bible about what is told of Jesus is accurate, right? Because in the same sense that he accuses the rest of scripture to be flawed, to be just someone's perspective, um, how does he know that what he has, and he has as the foundation of all of his, well, maybe not the foundation, I think there's other things as the foundation, and that's why he mistakes his hermeneutics and how he interprets scripture. So there's this idea of I don't want to, I mean, maybe political views, right, about gender and just a lot of power and all of those things that you hear these days. And then so with that in mind, then you go and kind of cherry pick the Bible and you make it about that. And so I'm like, well, if that's part of why you believe how you should live your life, what you define as marriage, then how do you know that you have it right in the first place? With the same logic that you reject the rest of scripture that contradicts your view about what is marriage. So just for anyone that doesn't know, this progressive Christian, he doesn't hold to the traditional view, the correct view about how marriage is between a man and a woman. And so this man is more of the view that he supports all these different kinds of genders to be also marriage. And he went on to argue about how like in science today, that they have discovered more than just the just two genders. And if you go to the most recent Dividing Line video on that YouTube channel, Dividing Line, Dr. James White goes into that. Apparently the person that he was debating, he had said, if anyone is interested in learning more about my sources, he didn't present them in the debate, but he's like, email me. And I think that Dr. James White received that, and so he discusses it like towards the second half of his video, I think. So you can go check that out. I guess I'll link that in the description as well if you're interested. But okay, this is what I wanted to share. As I was listening to the progressive Christian, I thought that, because I thought about, well, how can he know for sure that what he thinks is Jesus' teaching is not skewed? So I remembered a book that I read in a Christian Apologetics book club called Case Christianity, which I highly recommend. It really helps you to think about how we think and how we accept something as true, and how we can have confidence in knowing that the Bible is reliable, And the man in the debate raised things about like how there are supposed contradictions in the Bible. He goes into depth about how uh, in a real life scenario, we can all witness the same event and actually give descriptions differently because of where we were at, how our personal experiences will help us to like zone in onto certain details that someone else might not, and so forth. And but at this, although we have different things that seem contradictory of what actually happened, we can gather what actually happened and with what we have. And I wanted to read to you this portion of his book on page starting on 109 and finishing on 110. I hope Dr. Wallace is okay with that. It's under the title "A Tool for the Call Out Bag, a Tip for the Checklist." As you form your own so he's pretty much helping you to become like this detective so that you can investigate the evidence for Christianity. So the language might be like, what are you talking about? But let me just skip some of that part, those parts. Okay, when he's talking now, when I was an atheist, I believed the existence of scribal alterations in the Bible invalidated the evidential value of the text altogether. So so there are certain things that that are different. For example, they're very, very small things that that when you look at different manuscripts, there are differences, but they don't impact our overall understanding of what we have. So they're really minor things. And so because the amount adds up to many, people are like, whoa, how can you even know that what you have is real? But he's gonna go into this, and it goes with the debate, I promise. I now understand that this is not the case. Every crime scene contains artifacts. If I refuse to accept any explanation of the truth simply because an artifact was present along with the reliable evidence, I could never convict anyone of a crime. So he's talking about like when he is on the crime scene and they're looking for evidence. There's going to be a lot of stuff that isn't like evidence. It's not relevant, so you have to kind of sort through those things out. All ancient documents also contain textual artifacts. If we reject the entirety of scripture simply because it contains artifacts of one kind or another, we had better be ready to reject the ancient writings of Plato, Herodotus, Euripides, sorry, I don't know these names, Aristotle, and Homer as well. The manuscripts for these texts are far less numerous and they are far less reliable. So in the ancient writings that we have, that we don't bother to question, right? If we have what was actually written way back then, there's way less manuscripts. We have way more manuscripts. Manuscripts are like, they're not the original writings. For example, someone wrote one of the New Testament letters and they kept handing it. So those people that received them, they wrote a manuscript, like a copy. They're very careful. They wrote these manuscripts. And so the actual original, well, because it's getting passed on a lot, it's not going to last as much as like the other ones that survived. And we have way more manuscripts, so we can actually compare and see, hey, do we have a good understanding of what was written in the original? And so that's what he's talking about. If we apply the same standard of perfection that some would demand of the Bible to other ancient histories, we're going to have to reject everything we thought we knew about the ancient past. More importantly, it's vital to see that we do actually have a methodology that allows us to uncover the artifacts and separate them from the original text. So along the way, when people are copying manuscripts and so forth, although scribes did a really good job overall, they are human, and so they might make errors here and there. So there's actually a very responsible methodology, a way for us to be able to compare these manuscripts and be able to identify, so that is where there was a scribal mistake, for example. The art of textual criticism allows us to compare manuscripts to determine what belongs and what does not. The same process that revealed to me as a skeptic the passages that couldn't be trusted also revealed to me as a believer the passages that can be trusted. Textual criticism allows us to determine the nature of the original text as we eliminate the textual artifacts. They should give us more confidence in what we have, not less. And so that, I think that's one of my favorite quotes from this book. And there's more, but I'm not going to go into it because I'm running out of time here. So pretty much the point is, if you're like, how do I know if I actually have what the original people wrote, who were actually living closer to the time of Jesus, right? Like, how do I know? What about all the other people? So we have all these manuscripts that the only reason that non-believers can't even say, whoa, your manuscripts have this amount of like mistakes. Wow, can you even trust the Bible? Well, so the same way that we know about all the mistakes is the same way that we know all of the things that we do have right. And like I said, all of the little errors, although there are many, they don't change a thing about the actual message of the Bible. And applying it now to the progressive Christian, though, there is like this lack of trust in what the authors actually said. And so they're like, well, you got it wrong because of, like, look at slavery, look at you know, the whole issue with LGBTQ plus. Look at these Bible verses, they're wrong. Well, says who? You know, says who? And that's the thing. Like, look at how God has preserved His word for a reason, and let's accept how God defines marriage. So we can trust that what we have has been preserved. And now the thing is that you have to be very careful how you interpret scripture. That falls under hermeneutics. My observation in the debate is that this person was adding a lot of supposed implications of why Jesus said a certain thing and why. So the thing about progressive Christianity is that it sounds very inclusive, it sounds very loving, but if you are wrong in your interpretation of scripture, is it going to be very inclusive and very loving in eternity? You might have accepted a different interpretation of marriage than what scripture actually taught here on earth. And did you really help these people in the long term? Did you really teach them who Jesus actually is and what he taught? Because Jesus is the same God that you read in the Old Testament making these laws, and so he's the same God that said these things and made these laws, created only one man, only one woman. He could have created and defined marriage very differently, very inclusive at that point, but he didn't. And that's just something that If you're going to call yourself a Christian, that's what you have to accept and teach. If you're not, I mean, you can teach that there's different kinds of marriage, but you don't call yourself a Christian, because that's not what Christ taught in the Old Testament or in the New Testament. And in the New Testament, you see how Jesus lived his life very respectful of the scriptures, not sounding progressive at all. When he said, "You've heard this, but I tell you this," it's not replacing what God taught, because he's the one that was there saying those things. He's not saying, "You heard them say," they thought their perspective was that God want. No, it's, again, we're trusting that when God was inspiring these authors in the Old Testament, that they were getting the accurate information from God. So here's the point. Like, I guess without going too deep into it, I think it was self-refuting for the progressive Christian to supposedly assume that what he has from the authors in the New Testament is reliably what Jesus taught and believed, and that it was accurate, that what Jesus said is accurate. I feel like they're actually using Jesus as a puppet to, to justify their own views that are very different from what the Bible actually teaches as a whole, which is good, which is, we want everyone, in God's kingdom, so we need to teach them the right things. Yeah, so I think that's my point. I hope I made myself clear. Obviously, I don't promote any disbelief, any doubt. I just thought it was self-refuting for him to hold to a position where he questions pretty much everything that would make the case against his view of what marriage is. It's so convenient to just, discount all of that information in the Bible and to just say, but this, right here, this, we got it right. So anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. I do plan on going more into the topic of how we can respond lovingly and with truth to the LGBTQ plus people that identify as such. And so I do plan on continuing my studying on that topic, and hopefully I'll have something that I can present to you all in the future. I'll let you know more about that. Please like this video if you would like YouTube to make it more visible for more people to see, or share it with someone that you think will be interested in my comments on this debate. So much respect for Dr. James White for all of the work that goes into preparing and actually going and standing in front of all these people and debating, and for using his gifts for God's glory and for the work of God's kingdom here on earth. Joy to